So I think this session is open for questions. I have one from those attending remotely. It's for Chanel. Chanel, hopefully you can hear me. This is for you, do you have any data on how commonly dissemination or severe disease are in Native population compared to white populations? Can't hear you, Chanel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. So for coccidiomycosis, American Indians are 4 times higher, this is only in Arizona, likely than other races to get coccidiomycosis. And the data that I have been citing comes from, let me pull it up, Orion McCotter, and then also our colleagues at the Indian Health Service. It states that we also have a higher incidence of hospitalization, but we are 4 times higher than the regular population in Arizona to get coccidiomycosis. And I'm not sure if I answered that question correctly. I mean, I'm not sure if I heard it right.
No, I think you answered it. Thank you very much, Shauna. Other questions? There we go. Dr. Ampel.
Thanks, Neil. I'm Pal from Arizona. Well, Kim, really nice talk. And it seems to me that the prison outbreaks are a combination of placing individuals at extraordinary risk into extraordinarily endemic or epidemic areas. And the one thing I was going to ask, and I think John Taylor has done some on this, the west side of the Central Valley of the San Joaquin Valley seems to be highly endemic and not maybe associated with the soil itself, but with wind patterns. And I wonder if there's finally an issue that maybe we shouldn't have institutionalized individuals in that area of the valley.
Yeah, you're speaking, especially about Pleasant Valley and Avenal, and Pleasant Valley, which typically has, rates even 3 times higher than Avenal, 4,000, the rates are still very, very high. I, cannot really comment on, there were a lot of prisons that were built, in the 1990s, I think around 10 or 11 of them, and they were all in the Central Valley. And, the prison population in California at its peak, around, I want to say around early 2010s, was almost twice what it is now. And there's still intense pressure with overcrowding. And so, just the challenges of, what it would mean to actually close down an institution of that size. It's a challenge. I can't really comment on. It's a big issue.
John, can I ask you?
Yeah, hi. Eric Perlman, UC Irvine. There's really fascinating stories with the data there with health disparities from the speakers. And, I know tomorrow we're going to be talking about vaccines, but I'm wondering, when it comes time we do develop a successful vaccine, in terms of targeting who would get the vaccine, is there a sense that these people are more susceptible or would be the first people who would want to, first populations we would want to target for vaccine application?
Well, I think, in the state prison system, of course, it would be very, very valuable. I presented 3 different major efforts, interventions that are focused on medical restrictions, demographic restrictions, and these really impact people's lives, especially when, it goes into the decision of where someone can be, where they can live. And that's one of the issues with, using the Coxie skin test. People are factoring in, well, if I test, I'm probably going to be negative. And if I want to go to Avenal, well, I can't because I'm negative. So That's what's going through people's minds, I think. But, with a vaccine, obviously, that would not be a factor. And it would be, a nice number 4, major intervention number 4.
And I'll just add, I don't know too much about the vaccines in development and if they're trying to prevent infection or severe disease, but I think that's a factor. I know that from other vaccines, we have prioritized certain occupational groups, but then also people with certain medical risk factors for severe disease. So I think, occupation definitely ought to be on the table if we talk about prioritization, but I guess it depends on, what we're trying to prevent.
Chanel, did you want to make a comment?
I definitely, we have the highest vaccines that in Arizona that have been uptake by American Indians. I definitely think that, we are definitely would like to come to the table and be a part of, the vaccine, trial and error. We do have a lot of vaccine surveillance or just kind of like testing within the Navajo area and with Johns Hopkins and with, vaccines for pneumococcal. So we definitely, when it came to the vaccine for COVID, it really helped our people out because of our immune suppressants and our background with, our just kind of our health disparities. So I definitely, if it becomes a issue of having a vaccine, that would be great, an extra, place for us as American Indians to have something else to fight coccidium mycosis on our nations.
George.
I'd like to ask him a question, if I may, please, because you talk about 3 major interventions, but there was a 4th, which was trying to plant around the place, which was how they controlled cocci in World War II in the Army Air Force training base. And if you did like a time series analysis, could you actually see a drop off from the planting?
Well, it's really, really challenging because if I showed that timeline of interventions and then put, like the epidemic peaks and dips over that, it's a mix of all of these interventions, and we're expecting to have, rises and, we're expecting to have extreme fluctuation anyway. So it's really hard to tease apart, what the impact, I think, of each intervention is. And the environmental mitigation and the planting of grasses and that kind of thing only happened at Avenal and Pleasant Valley also.
Yeah.
Can't really tease it apart, I think.
Marie, I have a question for you. Declaring an event an occupational disease is not uniform across all states. Is that correct?
That is correct. So in terms of, I guess, workers' comp, different states have different definitions of how one proves that their disease was occupationally related. I think in California, and Gail, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, it's a 50 plus 1. So if there's, as long as there's a 50% chance or more that they could have gotten infected at work, then that would count as a workers' comp case.
And I know in Arizona, you can't acquire valley fever as an occupational infection. It was ruled by the Arizona State Supreme Court that it is not an occupational health disease. So the question is, does that interfere with your ability to figure out how much valley fever actually causes disease in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super hard to tease out whether a patient living and working in an endemic area was infected at work or, by working in their yard or, like umpiring a baseball game. So that's really difficult. But what we rely on are these sort of like population rates. So we look at incidents among workers per 100,000 people, and then we compare it to the sort of background community rate. And we consistently see that, these workers have much higher rates than the general population.
And I think we all know this, but because the occupational reporting in California occurs, we've picked up a lot of very specific outbreaks among the solar farms and I think movie set. So it is very useful to have it occupationally reported.
Yeah, and I'm from NIOSH, so we would advocate that we should always be collecting occupation, job title, and industry, the work setting, for every infectious disease, so we can figure this out a little more.
Other questions? Yes. And then Donna. And then
It's Fariba Donovan, University of Arizona. My question is for Chanel. Do you think that increase of the risk of valley fever in Native American population is related to maybe diabetes, higher risk of diabetes and COPD, especially in the pulmonary cocci, or is it more genetic predisposition?
I think we get more coccidiomycosis due to the area we live in, of course, but if you do have a comorbidity of diabetes, hypertension, that definitely you have a higher incidence for morbidity. So those definitely have been shown in the data that a diabetes diagnosis with coccidiomycosis will lead to, hospitalization, and then again could lead to morbidity. So definitely, but I don't think that having diabetes or hypertension or chronic disease will make you or more prone to get coccidiomycosis. I think maybe it would be opposite, that you might be out in your environment and then you get coccidiomycosis and then it affects your diabetes and your hypertension or your other chronic diseases.
Donna, did you have a question? I think we'll have time for one more and then take a break.
Hi, Donna Love, NIH. This is a question for George. Those numbers are rather astounding, the healthcare costs associated with valley fever. I was just wondering, could you compare it to some other infectious disease just to kind of give an idea of the scope?
Sure, I was going to do that, but I ran out of time. HIV is a lot more. Tuberculosis, so I can tell you that one right now. But compared to other infectious diseases, I think, because of the chronicity of care, especially with disseminated disease, I think this is on the high side. It's more than tuberculosis, I'd be willing to bet. And most infectious diseases is sort of, on off. You're sort of there and you get it and then you get over it. So it's very short term. But with the chronic diseases, I'd be willing to bet that this is above tuberculosis for lifetime medical costs.
Which you can cure.
Yeah, and you can
Right.
prevent it too, but at least you can sort of prevent
So one last question.
Hi, thanks, Kim. So I'm Dave Brett from Antivive Life Sciences, working on a vaccine. What I've been doing for more years than working on a vaccine, though, is working with CDCR. And I think one of the things that people probably don't appreciate about the California prison system and what's happening in those particular prisons is that you have inmates that we talk to who don't want to get skin tested, because they know if they're negative, they'll be moved out of those prisons. And it's not because they're scenic destinations. They're not scenic destinations. But they have very high rates of rehabilitative programming going on in those prisons that they don't want to forfeit. So one of the issues that CDCR is going to have to deal with, aside from all the medical and other issues, is how do you get those people to those programs if you're going to move them out of the middle of the fungus zone?
Thank you very much. This ends this session, and without a break, we're going to move right on. Mark Orbach is going to take my seat. And thank you very much for this panel.
I think her rings are right